Security Part 1. Well, the next several nuggets are going to have to do specifically with security, and the first two are just security part 1 and part 2 because there's a lot of different topics within these security items, and the two after that will be dealing with specifically with IPsec. In this first one, we'll talk about least privilege, and that means that we want to have users with enough privilege to perform their jobs, but not more than they need, so that they don't have too much privilege to be able to read things or change things they shouldn't be able to. And then we'll use run as well. Even as administrators, we need to log on as generic users, and then use run as for a secondary logon to enter in administrator credentials to run administrator tools and privileges. Then we'll take a look at delegation of control wizard so that you can use somebody like your help desk people to do certain kinds of administrative functions, but not all administrative functions like a domain admin would. And then we'll take a look at software restrictions as well, because there are certain tools or applications you might not want people to be able to run. We'll look at logging on locally to a domain controller. This is of interest if you are someone who's not a full domain admin, and yet you occasionally need to log on to a domain controller, perhaps to maintain it or do other things like that. So we'll take a look at a policy that allows that, and then we'll finish up with looking at the Microsoft Baseline Security Analyzer, which is a great way to check out individual machines, or a whole bunch of machines, see whether or not they have secure policies in place, whether or not they have best practices for Microsoft security recommendations, and to see whether or not they have the latest patches and updates. Well, when it comes to security, you're not going to really have much usefulness for all the security measures you take, whether it's encrypting network data, or hardening the firewalls within your organization, or any of that other kind of stuff that you can spend a lot of time and money planning if you don't also implement the principle of least privilege. Because even if you block just about everything through your firewall, except for little trickles of data that your company really needs to have, but which are highly confidential, if you give certain users the ability to read that data that don't deserve it, well, you've got a security breach right there. Let's take a look at some other things that you need to really keep an eye on for principle of least privilege. And again, this really just means that I'm going to allow users to do just what they need to do to perform their job function, and I'm not going to give them more privileges than that. I'm not going to over-privilege them. And part of that has to do with things like user rights, which you can see in group policy, which you can also see in security templates. And here we are at user rights under computer configuration, Windows settings, security settings, local policies, and user rights assignments. And I read that kind of fast, but we've already been here before. And then some of the things you might want to check out here, for example, is you might want to make sure that users cannot back up files and directories. I mean, after all, they can always back up their own files and directories as long as they own those files and directories. But you don't want to explicitly grant this privilege to a user or group unless you really want them doing backup functions. In that case, you also might just consider adding them to the backup operators group. Because if they can back up files and directories, they can back up other people's stuff and then put it on a CD-ROM, for example, and take it to a competitor, restore it to another hard drive, and then apply whatever security permissions they want to it. So you see, this has a great implication. You can lock down your network and encrypt all your network data, but if someone can take data and just walk out the front door with it, then you have another issue, especially when they can take somebody else's confidential data and walk out the front door with it. Also, again, review some of the security options. Again, these appear both within group policy as well as in the security templates, because remember, the security templates really are just settings that appear in group policy. So in group policy objects, for example, you want to make sure that, for example, I do not allow users to stay logged on beyond their logon hours. Maybe I've got a certain set of users that are only scheduled to work until 5 o'clock. Well, after 5 o'clock, we want to make sure that their systems forcibly log them off. Well, I might do something like this. Force log off when logon hours expire. That way someone's not lingering behind and trying to collect data or something like that when no one else is there and everyone else has gone home for the day. Well, at this setting, we can force that person to log off instead. That's just one of the security options we might want to take a look at. So again, that would be kind of a principle of least privilege there, because we only give them what they need to do to perform their job function, and we only let them work for as long as they are supposed to be working there. Then we also need to take a look again at our access control list, or our ACLs. Now, you've seen these before, I'm sure. These are simply where you right-click on a file or folder, choose Properties, and then go to the Security tab to adjust the security permissions. Make sure that you don't have groups or users that are members of certain groups. That's where our group membership is important here, so that they can access security permissions or access certain confidential documents that they're not supposed to be able to read. So just be careful of those kinds of things. That might also be important on certain registry settings. So you might want to restrict that on certain settings there as well. Then for the restricted groups here, remember that we saw in the security templates from a previous nugget that, again, this is where we can specify exactly who's a member of certain groups. You might want to, again, for example, clear out all members of the Power Users group using a security template, and that's what that template would do as long as you use it. And then what you can do is to add in only members of administrators from your network or the help desk group or something like that. And you might also add only certain members to the local administrators group as well. Now, another part of the principle of least privilege is making sure that you as the administrator only log on as a generic user account. Don't log on as a domain admin or an enterprise admin or any other privileged account. If you're just checking email and writing Word documents and working with little spreadsheets, doing all that normal user kind of stuff during the day, then just log on as a normal user. Because this will help to prevent a few things. I mean, after all, administrators, as paranoid and as careful as we are, we still get called away on little emergencies away from our desk. And if you're logged on as an administrator and you leave your desk and just absent-mindedly leave it unlocked, someone else can come along and log on to your machine and do untold damage, and you get all the blame because it's all logged under your account. So here, for example, I've logged on as Phoenix User 01, and I have got these things open, but let's just assume I've got an Excel spreadsheet I've been working on for hours, and it's just burned into my mind right now. I've got Microsoft Outlook open, and I got emails going back and forth that I'm trying to keep reading because they have information about how I should fill out this spreadsheet. I've got a Windows Messenger session open where I'm chatting with another administrator. And then the other administrator says, hey, James, we need you to create a new account, Phoenix User 02. This user's a new employee. They're trying to log on right now. So can you go ahead and create it? Well, if I'm just logged on like I am right now as Phoenix User 01, which has no administrative privilege and which is just a domain user, what can I do? One of two things, really. Number one, I could close Outlook. I could close Excel. I could stop my chat session, and I could log off, log on as an administrator, go to Active Directory Users and Computers, create the new user account, log back off from the administrator account, log back on as Phoenix User 01, open Outlook, open Excel, restart my chat session with that other administrator, and I'm back in business. Wow. That's a lot of work to create one user account. What I'd rather do is to do something like just stay logged on with keeping all those things open and making no change to my log on, what I'm doing right now, and keeping my applications open. And then I can use Active Directory Users and Computers from within this interface. Now, I've already installed it by going to the Windows Server 2003 CD-ROM, going to the i36 directory, and double-clicking on a file called adminpack.msi. Now, the reason why I did that is because it adds, if you go to All Programs here, where I've added the administrative tools to the Start menu, you see that it adds a whole bunch of the administrative functions that I might need to have as a domain admin. And the reason why I like to have these here under my generic Phoenix User 01 account is because I don't want to have to log off. And at the same time, I want to be logged on just under Principle of Least Privilege, where I do not use the privileges unless I need them. So if I stay logged on as Phoenix User 01, and if I were to be called away from my desk, I would not leave this desktop open to exploitation. So now, if I need to create this user account, which I was mentioning earlier, I could just click right now on Active Directory Users and Computers, but since I'm just logged on as Phoenix User 01 with no administrative privilege, I can't make any changes. For example, if I go to Users right here and right-click to choose a new user, Accounts, it's not there. See, I can't do that right now. In fact, I can't even go to these other accounts. I can't even copy it. It won't allow me to copy or anything like that. It shows me that I can delete, but if I try to do that and say, are you sure you want to delete this object? I say yes. Well, I can't do it. Now, that is one thing to keep in mind, by the way, because if you have all these things installed on a machine by using adminpack.msi, certain passersby or anybody else who uses this machine might see sensitive information, such as the contents of the membership for domain admins. They might be able to see whose membership is there. But at least for an administrator's desktop, you're going to have this. Now, let's go back to it this time. And this time we're going to use Run As, and I'll go to Administrative Tools here. Then I'll just right-click on Active Directory Users and Computers, and it gives me the ability to choose to be able to run this thing. Now, notice, however, that since I'm not logged on as an administrator, it doesn't give me the Run As item automatically when I right-click. If I were already logged on as an administrator and I right-click, it would give me the Run As function. But since I'm not, then I have to hold down Shift, then right-click. Now it gives me a Run As item here. So I'll click Run As the following user. I'm not going to run it as Quentin McCracken. Instead, I'm going to run it as my administrator account. So that would be Nugget Lab domain, and the name is the account is trainer for my administrator account with the password, and then click OK. And now once I've done that, it'll go ahead and open Active Directory Users and Computers. Now I can go back down through this thing, go down to my users. I can right-click. Notice that I now have a new and then user account that I could create. I can delete accounts if I want to. I can take an account here, whichever account I want. I can choose copy and create another account on that basis. So I have all the administrative function that I need now in Active Directory Users and Computers, and I could just right-click and choose to create that new account. Other things you might want to keep in mind here, by the way, is if you want to install applications. Again, just logged on as a generic user, if I go to Control Panel, and I say, you know what, I want to add a new application. Well, first of all, if I were to just browse for an MSI file, and this is important, if I browse for an MSI file, like I did for adminpack.msi offline before we started this nugget, then if I were to right-click on it and choose Run As, it wouldn't let me. It doesn't give you the Run As option when you shift right-click on those files. So instead what I'd have to do is to go to Control Panel and choose Add Remove Programs. Now I still want to launch Add Remove Programs as an administrator, but if I right-click on it, nothing happens, and I'm right-clicking right now, and nothing happens right here. That's because this is an XML kind of an interface that the Control Panel now appears in. In order to run this under administrative privileges, I have to switch to the classic view, and then there's my Add Remove Programs. I have to Shift now and right-click, and then it gives me a Run As. And now anything I do from within this, if I enter in the credentials of an administrator like trainer, and click OK, then it's going to open all this up. Anything that you start using the Run As command, if it spawns any additional threads, for example, if I choose to add new programs now and choose CD or floppy and browse for a specific application somewhere, and I can just UNC to it or browse for it here. Well, anything that I type in here now will be under the administrative credentials that I've already typed in, and then I could add that application here. So you'll need to be able to do that as well, like I said here, for certain items within the Control Panel. Now, there's not always something to right-click on. I mean, what if you have to do a command line utility? For that, if you go to a command prompt and you're just logged on as a generic user and you say, you know, this hard disk is acting kind of wacky, I wonder if it's okay. I guess I better run check disk. Well, you press enter and it says access denied here. And to me, it seems like check disk ought to be something that anybody ought to be able to run. But Microsoft limits it to administrator function. So what I would need to do now then is to do a run as /user and then enter in the credential. And I'll just enter in /user and then the UPN name of trainer@nuggetlab.com, or I can also enter in the NT4 style flat domain name, which would be nuggetlab/trainer. And then I'll press space here, and then I'll enter in the name of the command I want to be able to run, check disk, DSK, CHKDSK. Press enter, ask me for the password for the trainer account. I'll enter that in, and now it's running check disk for me. Looks like it's running just fine here. Now, another thing to keep in mind here is that any other threads, again, that it spawns from within that window when I was running check disk will also be run under the administrator account. Now, if I'm going to be doing several things from the command line, then what I'll really do here is I'll just do the same command, only this time I'm going to do CMD. Because what I want to do is to open up a command prompt window that I can launch other utilities from, and I'll just leave this open. Notice that when I ran check disk, as soon as it was done, it just closed that window. Well, I want to leave this open so I can run check disk, I can run defrag, I can do defrag C:\enter or something like that, and I can do all of this without having to go ahead and open up additional windows and stuff like that, and without having to repetitively enter in my credentials. Now, besides implementing the principle of least privilege and making sure that admins aren't always logged on as admins, we have somebody else that's kind of caught in the middle there, and that would be the help desk. I mean, we need to make sure that they can do certain functions, such as, here where I've got my help desk down here in the Phoenix OU, such as doing things like resetting a user's password, or disabling an account, or unlocking an account. Things of this nature, changing group membership perhaps. So we need to make sure that they can do that, but on the other hand, maybe we don't want them to be full admins. I don't want to add them to the enterprise admins group or domain admins or something like that. So how can I arrive at that middle ground? Well, first of all, I can take all of these user accounts and I can add them to the help desk membership. So I'm going to add them to the help desk membership. And I'll just type in the first few letters here, Phoenix Help. And then we'll go ahead and select all these users and click OK on the membership tab there and click on Add There, and we'll click OK here. Now I've got them all in the membership of the Phoenix Help Desk. Now the other thing here is I don't want them to have too much privilege, so that once I've added things like the adminpack.msi to client 01 where the help desk often works, then I don't want them to be able to add or to access more tools than they really are supposed to have. I don't want them to access Active Directory sites and services, or I don't want them to access certificate services, so I want to make sure that they can't even run those items. So how do I come to that happy medium? Well, the way that's going to happen is I'm going to use delegation of control. And that means that I'm going to change the access control list or access permissions on this actual organizational unit. And I'm going to give more permission there to the Phoenix Help Desk. And we'll take a look at that actual security tab here in a little while. Right now, if I click on Phoenix OU by right-clicking and choose Properties, we don't see a security tab. However, if I click on View and then click on Advanced Features, then I click on the Phoenix OU and choose Properties. Then we see a security tab here. And what the delegation of control wizard is actually going to do is it's going to add the Phoenix Help Desk group to this list. It's going to give them some limited amount of control. All right, so now let's go ahead and take a look at that. We'll right-click on Phoenix. We're going to go ahead and go to Delegate Control here on the right-click menu. And that really just takes us through a wizard that will make it easier than going through the Security tab there and granularly allowing certain permissions. So we start the wizard here and then click on Next. Now the group I want to add permissions for is going to be the Phoenix Help Desk group. So we'll go Phoenix PHX-HELP, something like that, and it gives us Phoenix Help Desk in the list, so we'll go ahead and double-click on that. Then we specify what we actually want it to be able to do. Now within this, I can be very granular if I want. I could choose create a custom task to delegate, and that would give me one subset of some of these different items. For example, where it says create, delete, and manage groups, well, I could just give them the ability to add people to a group, but to not delete membership from a group. To create, delete, and manage user accounts, I could give someone the ability to change only the phone number if I wanted to be that granular. But for the normal help desk functions, let's go ahead and click the things that we're probably going to need to do most of the time. So I'll go ahead and add a few of these checkboxes that explain themselves. Things I don't want to do is I don't want them to change anything in relation to group policy or anything like that. So I'm just going to leave those deselected, and we'll just manage the user accounts like this. So we'll go ahead and click on Next. And then the rest of the wizard is pretty simple. You just click Finish. So we'll just click on Finish here, and that's all there is to it. Now then, having gone back to the advanced view, we can go to the properties of the Phoenix OU, and from the security tab, we can see that the Phoenix Help Desk here does indeed have security permissions. They are now in the ACL, or the Access Control List. Although it doesn't look like they can actually do anything. Well, actually they can if you click on Advanced, and then you click on Edit for any of these things. And we see that they have full control over group objects and user objects, and they can control by creating and deleting group objects as well as user objects. So they pretty much have full control over that, and there's a lot of different little checkboxes to make that happen. That's why I use Delegation of Control Wizard. It's an awful lot easier. So now here I've logged on as Phoenix Help 01, one of my Help Desk membership user accounts, and I've created a shortcut on the desktop to Active Directory users and computers. Also, I've used a mandatory profile to take away administrative tools from the Start menu, because I don't want this person to have easily accessible other admin tools that they don't really have any business running. So we do have this Active Directory users and computers, however, or we could have custom built an MMC console or something like that if we wanted. In any case, we just have a shortcut directly to its location in Windows System 32. So they double click on this and they're going about their daily tasks, and it opens up for them, and they'll go through this and they say, oh, Phoenix User 04 needs their password reset, so we'll reset the password. And they'll click OK, and what do you know, they've successfully changed the password. And then they'll say, oh, there's Phoenix User 13. 13 is an unlucky number. We probably ought to just delete that user. Are you sure you want? Sure, yeah, why not? So they can add accounts, they can delete accounts, all that different kind of stuff. Well, then on some other day, this user might say, you know what, I'm kind of bored today. We don't really have that many passwords to reset or anything. And I wonder why they gave me this shortcut anyway. If I go to its properties, I bet it'll say, oh, Windows System 32. I bet there's a lot of other consoles in there that they haven't given me. If I click Find Target here, that'll open the folder. Oh, look, there's all kinds of consoles in here they haven't given me on the Start menu. What are they trying to hide from me? I wonder what this one is. dssite.msc. I think that's Active Directory Sites and Services. I've heard kind of about that. I wonder what would happen if I were to take this item right here and right-click on it and just choose Delete. Well, they actually can't do that because they are not domain admins, so they wouldn't have that capability anyway. However, there might be things in here that I don't want them to see. For example, I might not want them to see replication schedules and things such of this nature. Other MSC consoles in here as well, I might not want them to see. Maybe the domain item here. If we open up the domain, Active Directory Domains and Trust, maybe they'll see another domain in here that we've already created a trust relationship with because we're about to merge with another company, but that's supposed to be a secret, and it's not supposed to be available information yet. Well, see, then they might be able to see that too. Well, we want to be able to hide some of these things from them. So how are we going to be able to do that? Because since we've installed Active Directory's console tools here, by using adminpack.msi to install these tools, they could just go through the file system and double-click on those consoles, even though they don't appear on the Start menu. Well, one way we can fix that is to go to the group policy item for this organizational unit. So we can go to its properties, click the group policy tab, and edit a group policy that had already started within this location. So then we go to the Windows settings under the user configuration, and then go under security settings, and then software restriction policies. By the way, just so you know, we're going to do this by users so that it's going to apply to those help desk users, because the other users won't be able to use these tools anyway. But we can also do this by computer so that regardless of who logs on, it will also do software restriction policies, and that's under Windows settings, security settings, and also software restriction policies. Now right now there's no software restriction policies defined whatsoever, so to do that you simply right-click and then choose New Software Restriction Policies, and that's it. But the only problem with this is it doesn't actually do anything yet, because if I go to security levels, then this tells me whether or not it's allowing all software to run or allowing no software to run. Right now it says unrestricted, and you see the little checkbox there. That means that's the default setting, meaning that it allows all software to run. So anything that I would do for additional rules, which we'll look at in a moment, I would probably add in there to add certain things that we would not want to run. If it was a highly restricted machine, such as a kiosk or something, we could disallow everything. We'd right-click here and set that as the default, and then we would make exceptions in the additional rules for specific applications we did want people to run. In this case, I'm going to right-click here and choose a new path rule, and this is going to be in the Windows System 32 directory. So it might be something like DSSite right here. And then I would say I want that to be disallowed. Of course, I can enter in a description if I like as well. Now, that should work so that now if that user on client 01 logs on as a help desk person, and then they try to double-click on that DSSite.msc item, they will not be able to run it. Now, this could be very useful, again, for something like DSSite, but I would also think it would be very useful for some of your command line utilities, such as NetShell and some other things like that, if you wouldn't want your people to be able to run those applications either. Now, there is a potential weakness with that, and that is, what if not everybody has DSSite.msc in the System32 directory? What if they copied it out of there and put it in a different location? Well, then this path rule would not work. What we'd have to do then is to set up some other kind of rule, and more than likely the better rule there would be a new hash rule. This means that what it does is it'll take this executable or this application or whatever it is, send it through a mathematical hash and spit out a mathematical result. Then when someone double-clicks on that file, it compares it against the same mathematical algorithm for the hash. And then if it matches when they double-click on that, then it will prevent them from being able to run it. And that would be then true regardless of where that actual executable or console or file is. So let's go ahead and create a new hash rule, and we'll go ahead and try it. And for this, I can even just browse our local file system. So I'll go back here to our C drive, Windows System32, and then we'll go ahead and locate that particular file. And here it is here, DSSite.msc. I'll double-click on that. Here's the mathematical hash that it spit out for me. And then my security level will be disallowed, and I'll click OK, and that's pretty much it. Now let me just point out in brief what some of these other rules are. We don't really address these in a lot of detail, but we could also do a new internet zone rule so that, for example, we would only allow traffic to be run, or rather applications to be run from trusted sites or from a local intranet where we might have custom applications that we'd already configured with scripts that would be trusted and that kind of stuff. And you see the other items there as well. So you could allow or disallow items from certain internet sites. And then you can also do a new certificate rule, and for that you'll have to have a certificate to associate with the application. Now that's not as easy as it sounds. You actually have to use something else in programming to do that, and that would be something called Capicom, C-A-P-I-C-O-M, which is a cryptographic API provider, and you'll do that to more or less merge together a certificate or associate a certificate with a VB script or an application or something like that. So that's going to be a little bit more involved and involve programming. I think you get the idea, so now let's go ahead and take a look at Client 01 where we'll log on as a help desk user. And once we've logged on, we're going to go ahead and see whether or not we can now run DSSite.msc. Now here I've navigated my way to DSSite.msc in the Windows System 32 directory. Last time I double-clicked on it, it opened up just fine for me. This time when I double-click on it, I'm prevented from running it because I have a software restriction policy, and that's exactly what we wanted to happen. Now as I return to the server itself and I go to the Phoenix OU and go to its properties, if I go to group policy and then go to this policy here and then choose properties for it, I can also filter this according to security group. So I'd click on security up here and I would just add in, for example, the help desk, the Phoenix Help Desk security group, and then for my authenticated users to whom this policy doesn't really apply, I would just deselect read and apply group policy. And then when I add the Phoenix Help Desk security group, I'll just apply a group policy and read group policy to that specific security group, and we'd be good to go, and they would be able to read it. Then here's another thing I might as well just point out, this WMI filter item. You can set certain things up so that they only meet certain criteria. For example, there's a certain script that you could write so that if you wanted certain applications to be installed only on machines that had sufficient hard disk space, you could run a WMI filter, and if you click on this filter and browse manage, you can add additional filters and stuff like this. This is a little bit beyond our scope. It might involve a little bit of knowledge of WMI and scripting and programming, but you can create something that would identify various operating systems, various machines, various amounts of free hard disk space, things like this. And if they meet certain requirements, then they'll go ahead and use that policy. Let's also take a look at what you do for certain administrators that do have a higher level of privilege, and they might need to log on to the domain controller. And these might be people that are not domain admins, but that nevertheless have some limited level of privilege on a domain controller, such as maybe a help desk person that you're trying to train to eventually be a domain admin. Well, in that case, you might want them to sometimes log on locally to DC Nugget 1 or DC Nugget 2, whatever your domain controller is. And in order to make that happen, you're going to need to right-click on the domain controller's organizational unit and go to its group policy. And then go into the default domain controller's policy. And the reason why we're here is because generic users do not have the ability to log on to a domain controller. And for that, I've browsed down the way through here through computer configuration, Windows settings, security settings, local policies, user rights, and then you need to assign the user right to allow logon locally for the default domain controller's policy so that users could log on to that domain controller. And then you'd add in whatever help desk trainees security group or whatever else you want it to be. You know, there are a lot of different methods for making sure your systems are up to date in terms of critical updates and security fixes and all that kind of stuff. There are third-party products that will do that for us, but there's also something free from Microsoft that we can use called the Microsoft's Baseline Security Analyzer. And that particular tool used to be a command line only tool called HFNetCheck, and it was something you could run from the command line. You can still do that if you want to. But now the GUI version is very easy to use, and you can use it to check remote machines, so it's quite a lot more powerful than it was in years past. To get that tool, all I have to do is download it for free from Microsoft, and I've got it where I've downloaded it here. So I'm going to go ahead and double-click on that and go ahead and start the Microsoft Baseline Security Analyzer setup. And it's just a next finish thing, so I'll quickly go through this while I describe what all this is. It can do things such as scan an entire subnet. I recommend that you scan at least all of your servers, but all of your servers and randomly a workstation or two here and there so that you can see whether or not it looks like your clients are getting the updates they need. Now, if you decide not to use this method, there are other methods you can use. There are certain kinds of third-party tools out there that can also check all of your clients and regularly produce reports upon what updates they have. But at least this is free, and it's something that we should at least know about. So what we'll do here is to run the Microsoft Baseline Security Analyzer, which really just opens up a web page from which we can get started. Now, then all you have to do in order to run this is to scan a computer. If you want to do the local computer, you just click Scan a Computer here. You don't have to enter in anything. It'll automatically do this local computer name. And then what you can also do is to enter in an IP address if you wanted to do a remote computer. But this is just for one computer at a time. It'll create a security report, and it'll look for these various options. So as long as I'm not even running SQL on this server, it doesn't really matter that I select that item. So also, if I've got a software update services server, it'll check its security updates of the machine I'm scanning against a SUS server. And the SUS server is just the substitute for Microsoft's own Windows Update servers. We'll take a look at that a little bit later. Then we'll go ahead and click on Start Scan, and we'll let it do its thing, and we'll see a report in a few moments. And once it's done with its scan, we go ahead and see that it has now produced a security report, so it takes us immediately to the View a Security Report item here. And then we can see some details about what was scanned, what its IP address was, and so forth. Then we can go ahead and take a look at the kind of issues we have here. Oh, see, there's a security issue right there. Apparently, I'm a little behind on my Microsoft Office security updates. It tells me what exactly it's scanned. It'll open up a web page to show me about that. Gives you a little description of that if you like. It also tells you the result details, what exactly is wrong with this. Oh, we're missing Office XP Service Pack 3. All right. I guess I'll have to fix that and download that. Also, that would give me a link. Let me go back to that. That would give me the link to download it. So if I click on that, it opens up the web page to get the download file for Office XP Service Pack 3. 75 megabytes. I guess I'll wait till later to do that. Okay, so we can go into that. And then we can also, let me close this up. We can also go here to see how to correct this. This really is often included in the result details, but you just click how to correct this and it just kind of gives you generic information about how to fix it. In other words, go get the update is basically what it usually tells you. Now let's take a look at the there's not really a legend that you can see here, but you'll see there's a little red X there. That would be a failed check that was critical, and you can see a little, I don't know if you'll be able to see the little yellow pop-up there, the little text that appears. That's a critical one. This one would also be a failed check, but it would be non-critical. The little blue asterisk here is just something that you're not doing to comply with Microsoft's own best practices. And of course the green checkbox means that you passed OK. And then having scrolled down a little further here, we also see an I, which is just information for you to know about that might have particular interest in terms of security. Now then offline, I went ahead and scanned multiple computers, and I did it by clicking Scan More Than One Computer and entering in a range of IP addresses, although I could have also scanned an entire domain by its domain name right up in here as well. And then once that was done, now I can click on Pick a Security Report to View. These are the items that had an issue, so if I go to this one that has severe risk on it, I could go and look at Client 01 and see there's got to be a red X somewhere. Okay, the local password test has failed because apparently there are a couple of weak passwords there that are either blank or just oversimplified passwords. So that kind of thing's good to know. It looks like maybe an administrator went there and got a little bit lazy on some of the passwords, and so they might have reset the administrator password to something that was too easy to remember or too simple or something like that. Now, you might also want to use Microsoft's Baseline Security Analyzer in a command line utility, which is exactly what you'll see up here. And then there's a whole list of switches you can use if you do a / a lot of very useful items for this. You can, again, do a certain range of IP addresses, for example, with the /R. You can do a specific IP address, /D with the name of your domain here. So all the things you can do really within the graphical user interface, you can also do from a command line. But it might be more useful if you want to put this in a batch file, and then if you want to use it as a scheduled task to run once a week or something like that, to scan all the systems within a certain range of IP addresses and the like. And then you can also schedule that to run during non-peak hours, for example. Now here offline, I've gone ahead and run MBSA CLI, and what we see happens here is that it actually connects to Microsoft's website to download the latest version of an XML file, which has all of the security patches and updates within it. And then it compares whichever machine you're scanning against the contents of that XML file to see if it passes muster. And then when it's done, it'll go ahead and tell you what it did, and it tells you the name of the file that it went ahead and created, a log file for this. And if we go ahead and take a look at that location, you'll see that it stores it underneath Documents and Settings, name of the user, and then Security Scans, and here's the actual security scan that it performed. And then, of course, this is an XML file. I could just double-click on it and open it in Internet Explorer, but it'd be a lot easier to read if I just open that up using the Microsoft Baseline Security Analyzer, and then I point to this location and open it directly within that. That way it'll show me all the little, red X's and the little blue asterisks and all that kind of stuff. It'd be a lot easier to read. And then in order to use that or to look at that within Microsoft's Baseline Security Analyzer, I'll just reopen Baseline Security Analyzer. And then I'll pick a security report to view. I deleted the other ones, but here's the one that I just now did just a moment ago. So if I click on it, it now takes me to the View Security Report node right here, and it shows me all of the contents again so we can check this all out in the GUI. This was the first of several nuggets dealing with security, and particularly, we deal with least privilege. We want to make sure that users have enough privilege to do their job, but remember, we don't want them to do too much or to access things they're not supposed to be able to access. We also wanted to make sure that we as administrators log on as just generic users, and then we can use run as, or the secondary logon, to enter in administrator credentials to run administrator tools and so forth. Then we also, remember, we can allow delegation of control by using the delegation of control wizard on an organizational unit, and doing that will allow somebody or a group to be able to perform administrator functions, but not all administrator functions, just the ones you specify. We also can restrict software so that they can't run certain tools or applications that you might not want them to be able to run. And then we also looked at how we could run a local logon to a domain controller, and there's a group policy that we saw that allows us to do that. And then finally, we finished up with looking at the Microsoft Baseline Security Analyzer so that we can make sure that all our machines are in compliance with Microsoft's best security practices and latest updates and patches. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.